There's a sentence that rarely appears in the British press, but one that is long overdue. We owe Harry and Meghan an apology. It's not a slogan or a headline to spark clicks. It's a truth that's been waiting, buried beneath years of distortion, distraction, and deliberate misunderstanding. And now, as the tide begins to turn, that truth is finally being spoken aloud. In a recent piece for the paper, journalist Rebecca Reid captures what many have quietly felt for years: that the real scandal within the royal institution isn't Harry and Meghan's independence, or their desire for privacy, or their tell-all moments. The real scandal is how they were treated. For so long, the British public has been fed a carefully curated image of what a royal scandal looks like. A young couple stepping back from royal duties. Scandal. A woman speaking about mental health and racism. Scandal. A prince protecting his family from an onslaught of press harassment. Scandal. But when we strip away the hysteria, when we finally look at the bigger picture, the pattern becomes clear. The loudest outrage was never really about them. It was about what they represented. Harry and Meghan symbolized change, a modern, multicultural, empathetic vision of royalty that didn't rely on stiff upper lips or outdated hierarchies. And for an institution built on continuity, on control, and on centuries of unspoken rules, that change was too much to bear. Rebecca Reid's article strikes a chord because it names something the public has sensed, but few in mainstream media have dared to say. That the way Meghan and Harry were treated, the double standards, the cruelty, the gaslighting, was not only wrong, it was revealing. When we compare their treatment to others within the royal family who have been tied to genuine scandal, financial controversies, moral failures or grave allegations, the contrast is painful. Those individuals were given silence, protection or quiet rehabilitation. Harry and Meghan were given none. Instead, they were picked apart piece by piece, their motives questioned, their sincerity doubted, their love story mocked. Every gesture became a headline. Every look became a story. Every silence became a crime. And through it all, the institution remained passive content to let the storm rage, as long as the spotlight stayed off everyone else. It's easy now to look back and think maybe it wasn't that bad, but it was. For Meghan, it was the relentless barrage of coded language, difficult, diva, outsider. For Harry, it was the realization that the same press that hounded his mother was now being allowed to do it again, this time, with the woman he loved. Reid's article doesn't romanticize them. It simply calls for fairness. And fairness means acknowledging that the hate campaign went beyond gossip, it became psychological warfare. Think back to those early years. When Meghan was pregnant, tabloids published stories mocking her for cradling her bump too much. When she gave birth, she was criticized for withholding information. When she spoke about suicidal thoughts, she was told to stay quiet. Each time she opened her mouth, the public was told to view her words through suspicion. Each time she stayed silent, the media filled that silence with venom. Rebecca Reid's argument is that the real scandal lies not in Harry and Meghan's escape from the palace walls, but in what forced them to leave in the first place. She challenges readers to look beyond the headlines and ask, what does it say about us as a country, as a press, as a people, that we treated a woman who asked for help as if she were a threat? For all the talk of royal duty and tradition, Meghan and Harry showed something far rarer: humanity. They admitted struggle. They set boundaries. They said no to an environment that had become toxic. and for that they were cast as villains. It's worth pausing here, because when the article says we owe them an apology, it isn't referring to some symbolic gesture. It's calling for accountability, for recognition that what happened was unjustifiable. Harry was born into a system he didn't choose. He grew up watching it destroy his mother. He tried to reform it from within, through his work with veterans, through Invictus, through mental health initiatives. But when the woman he loved faced the same brutality Diana did, he drew the line. That isn't rebellion, that's survival. And Meghan? She entered that system with good faith, a successful independent woman who wanted to serve. What she found was hostility cloaked as tradition, racism masked as concern, and control dressed up as protocol. Her crime was existing as herself. Her punishment was public vilification. Reid's article points out that the recent unfolding of other royal crises, genuine ones, has forced the public to reckon with how misdirected the outrage toward Harry and Meghan truly was. When measured against silence around actual misconduct elsewhere, the double standard becomes impossible to ignore. For years, the media told us that Meghan's decision to fly privately, or to guest edit Vogue, or to speak at a charity event was proof of hypocrisy. Yet when others engage in excess or controversy, the coverage softens, the language changes, the outrage disappears. The inconsistency reveals everything. It wasn't about what she did. It was about who she was. There's a line in the article that resonates deeply, a quiet reminder that compassion is not weakness. Rebecca Reid writes that we have been so conditioned to view the monarchy through spectacle that we forgot the humans inside it. Harry and Meghan reminded us forcibly, uncomfortably, that the crown does not erase emotion, or pain, or difference. They reminded us that being royal does not make one less deserving of empathy. And that's what terrified people, because empathy disrupts hierarchy. Once you see royals as humans, the myth of divine detachment begins to crack. The apology, then, is not just personal, it's collective. We owe it to Meghan for every cruel headline, every microaggression, every whisper that she was too ambitious, too confident, or too outspoken. We owe it to Harry for every time his care for his family was painted as betrayal, his honesty as weakness, his independence as arrogance. And we owe it to ourselves for letting the media dictate who we should love and who we should despise. When the couple spoke with Oprah, the world listened. But the British establishment closed ranks. Instead of reflecting on the pain expressed, commentators chose to argue over who said what, as if the details were more important than the distress. The article challenges that reflex. It says, "The moment Meghan said she didn't want to be alive, that was the story. That was the moment empathy should have overridden gossip. And yet the response was cynicism." Reid reminds us that this was a failure of compassion on a national scale. We did not protect the person who needed protecting most. The apology isn't about rewriting the past. It's about recognizing that the narrative we were sold was wrong, that the scandals we obsessed over were distractions from the real dysfunctions that remain unaddressed. When we think about what constitutes a royal scandal, it should mean abuse of power, moral corruption, misuse of funds, betrayal of public trust. Not a couple choosing love and mental peace over duty. In that sense, Harry and Meghan were never the scandal. They were the mirror, reflecting uncomfortable truths the institution refused to face. Reid's essay calls for honesty, but also for growth. She suggests that Meghan and Harry's story might one day be remembered as the beginning of something necessary, a reckoning, because their departure forced questions that can no longer be ignored. Why are outdated hierarchies still being protected? Why are independent voices punished? Why are empathy and vulnerability treated as weakness? These are questions that threaten the entire structure, which is precisely why the institution sought to silence them. And yet, despite everything, they have thrived. From California, the Sussexes have built a new chapter: charitable work, advocacy, storytelling, humanitarian partnerships. They've shown that dignity doesn't depend on titles or palaces. It depends on integrity. And that's perhaps the quiet triumph at the heart of Reid's article, because even as it acknowledges the cruelty of the past, it also celebrates resilience. Harry and Meghan refused to be broken by an establishment that wanted them humbled. Instead, they redefined what it means to live freely. Reid's reflection is not an isolated one. It represents a shift in tone, a slow, reluctant acceptance within British commentary that perhaps, just perhaps, we got it wrong. That maybe the Megxit narrative wasn't desertion, but emancipation. That maybe the ones who left were not disloyal, but disillusioned. And in that reframing lies hope, because acknowledging injustice is the first step toward repairing it. What would an apology look like? Not a press release, not a palace statement drafted by lawyers. A real apology would begin with honesty. It would sound like this: "We failed to protect you when you were under attack. We dismissed your pain because it made us uncomfortable. We allowed a campaign of abuse to masquerade as journalism. We told the public that you were the problem when we knew the problem was the system itself." Those words may never come from the palace balcony, but they are words many ordinary people are quietly thinking and perhaps beginning to say aloud. Reid's article ends on a powerful note: that our obsession with the spectacle of monarchy blinded us to our own complicity. And she's right. Every click, every share, every headline consumed without question contributed to the storm that drove them away. It's easy to blame the media, but the media reflects demand. If we wanted fairness, we would have asked for it louder. If we wanted truth, we would have stopped rewarding cruelty. The apology, then, is not just owed by the tabloids or the palace. It's owed by all of us. Yet, in many ways, Meghan and Harry have already accepted that they may never get one. They moved forward without permission, without validation, without the institution's blessing. They built a life grounded in purpose, in compassion, in service, the very values they were told they abandoned. And perhaps that's the most fitting response to injustice. Not vengeance, but evolution. They outgrew the institution that refused to grow with them. If history is kind, and one day it will be Meghan, and Harry's story will not be remembered as a cautionary tale. It will be remembered as a turning point, a moment when two people said enough, when they refused to play the game of image over integrity, when they chose love over legacy. That choice, once ridiculed, now looks profoundly wise, because the same press that once mocked them is now forced to confront its own complicity. And voices like Rebecca Reid's are finally saying what needed to be said. This is what a real royal scandal looks like. Not Harry and Meghan, but the machinery that failed them. An apology will never undo the hurt, but it can mark a beginning of truth, of empathy, of accountability. And perhaps in the quiet of their Montecito home, with their children playing nearby, Harry and Meghan already know. They didn't need the institution's approval to be vindicated. Time did that for them, because eventually the truth always emerges. And when it does, the only thing left to say is simple. We were wrong. We're sorry. You deserved better. That's what a real royal scandal looks like, not the couple who left, but the silence that followed them out the door.